Welcome to the Pebble in My Shoe podcast. I'm Miffy Hode, your host here, and in each episode, I'm in conversation with my guests about the pebble in their shoe that has nudged them to choose a life that aligns them closer to their truth and authentic self. The pebble in my shoe is an analogy for an inner niggle or knowing that becomes so insistent that we have to pay attention. We can ignore it only for so long and eventually have to stop to investigate it, listen to it, and honor what it's telling us. It becomes a catalyst for action to change something that no longer serves us. This can be something internal, like a belief or mindset. It can be about how we behave in certain situations or relationships. Or it can be something that changes our life trajectory, like ending a relationship, changing careers, or moving to a different place. Taking the action and making the change invariably requires courage, often a leap of faith, and at the very least, to try something new and outside of our comfort zone. Whatever the action or change happens to be, the pebble ultimately moves us to live more authentically and more aligned to our true nature. My intention for the conversations here is to inspire or offer hope to those of you who resonate with the stories shared, that you'll hear something that supports you on your own journey, and if there's a pebble in your shoe, that you'll find the courage to make the changes that align you closer with your authentic self. Thank you for being here, and let me introduce today's guest. Eilish O'Rourke is a mindfulness instructor. Her business name is Sensing Moments. Eilish supports ladies who are ready to learn how to focus their attention, how to break the cycle of just existing, to feel love, joy, fun and peace in their hearts and minds. She teaches how the mind works and how to be in the moment. Originally from Granard, Eilish qualified as an accountant and worked in Dublin before meeting her husband, moving to Kilbeggan and raising her family. Life kept showing her that while she was good at her accounting job, there was another path for her. She was guided to mindfulness, which she now teaches and is a regular on Athlone Community Radio. Eilish is also a Reiki Healer. Welcome, Eilish.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Eilish, can we just start by just tell us a little bit about yourself? I know I've introduced you there, but just tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
I'm my mid-50s. I'm a mammy to an 18-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl, wife of Martin, who's a farmer, and getting to know who I am. That's where I am at the moment, and getting to like who I'm meeting and who is unfolding, and taking chances, creating my path. 20 years married and worked in Dublin as an accountant. And then when I moved to Kilbeggan, the children were little and I did small contracts, like 6-week or 2 months to 3 months contracts in accounting roles, because that's what I knew. It was always, when I was looking for jobs, it's what I knew. So regardless of what I thought of it, I just kept going for it. But it was never bringing me any joy, but it was bringing me money. So I was, if that was the aim of the game. Thankfully, COVID arrived and my sister had guided me to an app and I started to meditate. And within 30 days, I loved it. And the subtle changes within the 30 days. And then the following January, it was suggested to me that I'd be good at mindfulness. And I went, and then I went, wow, yeah. And I finally found the topic that I'd like to teach. And that was, I always wanted to teach. So started the mindfulness course, qualified 15 months later, and started then teaching classes. While going for Reiki healing, it was suggested to me by the lady that did my Reiki healing that Reiki would be very beneficial for me as a Reiki healer. And I thought about it and I went, yeah, I'll just do Reiki 1, never ever going to do Reiki 2. I did Reiki 2 and I was never going to do Reiki 3. So can you see the pattern? And now I'm hoping to do Reiki 3 in October.
Excellent, excellent. You've kind of given us a sort of a potted history there of your career trajectory. But can you take us back, please, to the beginning? So how you got into accountancy, what that was all about? Because as you know, here on the podcast, I love to drill into the stuff that is kind of that influences our journey, the reasons why we follow certain pathways, and then those pivotal moments where shifts occur or changes occur, or that pebble gets uncomfortable and we have to pay it attention. But if you could bring me back to, let's say, you know, your early kind of career choices and those moments, what was happening for you then and why did you choose accounting?
I can't remember a lot about primary school, and secondary school I went to because you had to go. And then the Leaving Cert came along and it was suggested. So you can see a pattern there as well. It was suggested we owned a business, a successful business, and Daddy had huge respect for education and felt it very important. And Mammy was a nurse before she got married. Daddy would have left school very, very early, but was successful in business. So he was streetwise and brilliant in what chances came his way. So he felt business was great and to have the skill of accounting background. So after my Leaving Cert, I joined a course. It was an accountant technician course. That was pre-accountant. So I was delighted I got the place. I was delighted to go, but it was, it was a challenge. Then I got.
When you say it was a challenge, sorry to interrupt you, but what was challenging about that for you?
The topic. I now know that I just did it, but I got nothing out of it.
Okay.
And I found the topics hard,
Okay.
and I often struggled with the ordinary learning of it. And I would have to read and read and read or practice and practice. And then who I was would have got bored and then not do anything with it.
Mm.
As opposed to saying, I can't do this anymore.
Okay.
Not getting anything out of it. But I still continued and I still went on then to get a job in practice, in an accountant's practice. And then I went back and I did CPA.
What does CPA stand for again?
Certified Public Accountant. There's ACCA, there's Chartered, there's CPA, there's ICMA, which is Cost and Management. I look back now and I'm like, oh gosh, I would have loved to have been able to say, I don't want to do this anymore. There is other ways for me.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of what you would have loved to have done instead? Like, did you know then? Like, I know looking back, it's easy to kind of go, oh God, yeah, well, I would have loved that. But at the time, was there anything that you kind of felt you'd rather be doing?
I wanted to be a hairdresser or a secretary.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what I was going to be a secretary in, but I knew with a hairdresser because my aunt was a hairdresser and she lived across the road. And I loved going over to her and it was great and meeting all the women and having the chat.
And would you help her out?
Yes, yeah. It was great. We did the towels and I still hang up towels and I still hang up clothes the way, like she could have to maybe hang up 100 towels a day. As well as hanging up towels, you still had to do other stuff. So she showed me and I still hang up towels that way.
Yeah.
And it's neat and I keep the towels together, I keep clothes together, I keep dishcloths together. And it's just something I learned from her, with the secretary, I just didn't know. I didn't know who I was. So I didn't know what I wanted.
You made a comment earlier, Eilish, about, a pattern emerging there of people suggesting things to you. Will you talk to me a little bit about that?
And that's only after coming up today.
Okay.
I'm only realizing I've done an awful lot because it was suggested to me.
Mm.
It was probably where I put more emphasis on the importance of the person talking to me
Okay.
than who I was at the time. So if they suggested it, sure, it must be right.
Mm.
It must be right. And then I could resent that person for suggesting it to me and me following through.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because it's sort of there's something in there around learning to take ownership of our own choices and decisions, but not recognizing that, before we get that self-awareness of that part, that we actually have a say. But what I'm hearing is there that you didn't feel that you had a say, that it was kind of your choices hinged on what other people might recommend.
Maybe before I did all the work on myself, I would have blamed the other people. Same scenario, but I would have blamed my parents for putting me to accountability. Whereas now I say, I didn't know myself, so at least I had something to do
Okay. Mm.
and I followed. And I blamed a lot of people for a lot of things, plus blaming them for my behavior. If the behavior wasn't appropriate at a certain time, I would say, well, it's because that happened, or he did that, or she said that, or whatever.
Mm.
So now, something as simple as in every course I've done since setting up my business, I've always been suggested to do a vision board. And I struggled with that vision board. And I've only recently achieved a vision board because I now know who I am.
Okay. And what you might want. And so you can put things on the vision
Yeah,
board that your
yeah,
choice.
yeah,
Wow, that's pretty
yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
Eilish, I remember in a previous conversation we had that you talked to me about the impact that mindfulness had on you and your family. And I'd
Mm.
really love to hear you talk about that again because you spoke about it before very eloquently when we had a conversation.
Thank you.
And so you got into mindfulness when COVID came in and you started doing the 30-day meditation practice and so on. So will you talk me through, what mindfulness did for you first and foremost? Because I know you're a teacher of mindfulness, but before you got to be a teacher, you had to learn how to practice it yourself, right? So we become mindfulness practitioners first and foremost. I'm really interested in hearing more about the impact that mindfulness had on you personally as a practitioner.
In the 30 days of the meditation on the first week of or month of COVID, it was 10 minutes and then I had to have everyone quiet, no telly on, nothing. It had to be quiet because I was doing a meditation. And by day 30, I could have done the meditation in the center of a street, a main town, a main shopping center. And I would have been able to meditate with everything going on around me. So I learned that in the 30 days, but I also could feel certain things changing within me. So that was March 2020. 21, I registered for the mindfulness in April of 2021. I started. And the structure was on Zoom, and we were given, the first 8 weeks, we were given theory and we had questions, but we were also guided to do more meditation, more journaling, more observation. And while the meditation is the formal practice, drinking a cup of tea is informal, having a shower is informal, going for a walk. And it was to use our senses. So I read and I read and I listened. And then I was noticing other little changes. And suddenly I noticed our house becoming a home while I was studying. And even as I say that to you, I can feel my body reacting. So that's 3 years ago. So there was 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an over 29-year-old here. And my husband, we had responsibilities, both sides. And suddenly I noticed the house becoming more peaceful, more fun. That when one of the children called me or wanted to show me something, I dropped everything and turned round and gave them my full attention. I learned how to be present because all my life I either was living in the past or the future. And because that was programmed as my subconscious, I knew no different. So that's the way I always thought. No matter where I always was in the past or the future, and I never was in the present. So suddenly we're sitting around the table more. Suddenly we're laughing more. Suddenly we're going for walks. Suddenly my children, or maybe I'll say subtly, my children are saying to me, will we go for a walk? Will we go for a drive? They might not leave the dinner table and the kitchen as quick.
Okay.
They are very, very tiny little changes that weren't in our house, but that started to become in our house. And I noticed then with my brother and sisters, I noticed I was able to say, actually, I prefer not to discuss this anymore. I moved myself away from gossip. I moved myself away from judging. I never thought I judged because I didn't say it out. But the judging was often here. But because I didn't say it out, I didn't think I judged. And the definition of mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose. And all those little things I've said to you is the awareness of the changes in our home. And then without judgment. And I was like, oh my gosh, I judge so much. And then we're always guided in our course not to judge our judging, because if we add fire to it, we're going to be annoyed with ourselves. I learned compassion for myself and I learned gratitude. And my children, while I don't teach them mindfulness, I can hear their words and I can see their actions and their behaviors like mine without me ever telling them. So I love my home. I loved my home. I loved the house. I love my children, but now I feel it. I never felt love, as in the feeling of it, because there was so much shame, so much guilt, so much anxiety, that there was no room for any of the love, the joy, the peace. And now I have space because the lower energies have dissolved and they're leaving my body. I still have 60,000 thoughts. Maybe 4 years ago, 40,000 or 50,000 of those a day could be negative. I have it probably down to 10,000 a day. Now I'm using those figures because that's what we learned. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. So mindfulness has I smile. My heart gets warm. When I talk about mindfulness, when I think of it, I'm so, so grateful because I could have made wrong decisions by not being aware and then blame it on someone else.
Yeah.
Because that's what I always did. Now, some of those incidences might have been little, so I was totally overreacting and totally irrational. Some of them mightn't have been nice at all and would have warranted maybe a conversation or that wasn't nice, I don't feel good. But I wasn't even able to do that because I just went quiet because I didn't know the skills of how to be engaged in a discussion about behaviour.
It's very refreshing, Eilish, to hear you talk this way because it's very honest and it's, I can just feel this full accountability coming through from you, that you're really owning how you were without judgment, with that self-compassion, that you knew no better. And, you know, as Maya Angelou famously said, you know, when we know better, we do better. And it's just lovely to hear, because I think what you're telling is actually quite a common story of people kind of going through life in this sort of going through the motions, let's say, you know, and that sort of sense of, you know, bumbling along and doing the best you can without a huge amount of self-awareness, blaming everybody and everything else for our lot, and missing the point. And I think the very poignant piece that you said was how you love your kids, and you always have, but it's that feeling love that there wasn't space for, because there was so much other stuff in the way, the anxiety, the angst, the trying to, you know, get things right, and the judgment and all of that stuff. That's really big right there, right? That's an amazing thing. And to be able to feel your heart warm, to be able to feel love in that physical sense as well as the emotional sense and all of that, and to get to a place where you can say, gosh, this is sort of what's been missing all this time. Can you tell me more about that for you, that whole process of shifting from, you know, into that sort of loving space?
Well, I'm having awareness moments or aha moments, penny dropping moments every day. Every day I realized recently I didn't get my own way with my husband. I can't even remember what it's about now, but I was thick with him from Wednesday to Friday, and he never even noticed. I still behaved appropriately, but I was thick with him. And then before I said it to him, I realized the reason he wasn't doing something was an old habit, an old program that I wanted him to do it for. So I realized it wasn't in our highest interest that he do it. Even though he wasn't doing it, it wasn't that my reason for asking him to do it was based on ego.
Okay.
And then that made me show me that only I can make me truly happy. And if I'm relying on someone else, that's not fair. They have to be responsible for their own behavior and their own real deep happiness. We can say we're happy, but truly, and because I say all this, the change was subtle, but when I add them all together, it's actually profound.
Sure.
I am quirky. I'm for the birds. I take things literal. I was in a shop recently, and the owner told me that there was a big lottery coming up, and that some man went in and bought 300,000. It must have been 20 million or something, the lottery. 300,000. He said he tied up the staff and bought 300,000 euros worth of lottery tickets. I went, he tied them up and then bought. How did he do that if he tied them up? But she was saying that he kept them all busy by buying.
Right, okay.
And I'm like going, but I didn't go red. I didn't. I just laughed. And I went, there's me. I take things literal.
And in the past, Eilish, would that have been a stressful situation for you when you realised that you'd taken something the wrong way? Or
yeah, I'd be mortified. And if someone then would have said something, I would have felt guilt and shame. And I would have been, why did I say that? Why did I? And then in some groups or in some meetings or in some gatherings, I'd be saying, don't say anything, don't say anything. And then if I said something, it'd be, oh God. So I'd be watching what I'm saying, and then I was always on edge.
Eilish, can we go back a bit? Because I'm really interested in that shift you made from being an accountant and doing things because that was sort of what you felt other people expected of you, doing things that didn't bring you joy, but that paid the bills, And then that shift to actually finding something that you do want to do and that you do love to do. And yeah, making that shift into doing something quite different to accounting, that pebble in your shoe, really.
Yeah. I'd say 8 or 9 when I knew what I'm doing now is what was meant for me.
How did
And
you know?
I knew I knew I was different.
Okay.
When I was 18 or 19, it was the automatic way. I don't know if mindfulness was sure it's around for years, but I did the accountancy, I did the work. And I remember saying to my sister, I'd love to teach. But she said, what are you going to teach? And I went, don't know.
Is it fair to say that the pebble in your shoe was the not really knowing what you wanted to do, but knowing it wasn't this?
Yeah, I think, to keep it in context, not knowing what I wanted. Don't know if I was educated enough to say I keep going into the wrong environment and I keep getting the wrong results. I wasn't that educated. I now know that that's what was happening. Like I had my thyroid out in 2004, and Louise Hay has always said that every part of your body's ailments is affected spiritually or physically connected. So my thyroid was my voice.
Okay.
And I didn't use my voice.
At what point in your life did you come across Louise Hay?
A girl I lived with read it, and then we were in college. Could have been the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and she read it. But I remember the name Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And I was like wondering, why was she reading You Can Heal Your Life? I didn't know anything about healing your life, even though I was a walking wound.
Oh.
But, I just was a wound of anxiety. And then I was at a chiropractor in Maynooth, and she had books, and I saw You Can Heal Your Life. And I went, oh, took it home. I had it read, I think, in 2 nights, and I went, oh my God, how she spoke was just, it was as if she had written it especially for me. And then I read her next one, and I would have done, done CBT and all of that. I could have taught it, but I wasn't practicing it enough for it to change my life. Mindfulness, I practiced it, and it changed my life. It changed the patterns in my brain. I can honestly say that mindfulness was like the icing on the cake, or the mindfulness was another level of help, self-care, help. But it seems that it was only mindfulness that changed. But I was doing lots of little things, but mindfulness was the first time I ever was doing something that I don't really listen to the radio now because I'm listening to podcasts, or I'm listening on a Saturday. It's your podcasts and I think I do definitely 2 a day. But if I can get into the third one, when I'm doing dinner, when I'm doing something that I can work away from my autopilot, knowing that I can peel potatoes, I put on podcasts, I read. So it's the first course I've ever done that I did outside work.
And so what I'm getting a sense of then, Eilish, is that down throughout your life, it's like you've had these two tracks running, right? That track of work and family and, sort of doing what's expected of you, doing what's suggested, or kind of going along with that. But there's also been this concurrent track of interest in You Can Heal Your Life, sort of, you describe yourself as a walking wound. And I just think that's so poignant, And so there's this awareness and this interest in this stuff, but it's almost as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm getting the sense that never the twain shall meet until you discovered mindfulness and that practice, and you really started to sort of integrate the practice and use it, and then it all fell into place, and those 2 tracks kind of merged then, and that is where this kind of revelation and so on you experienced. Is that fair to say?
I had huge, huge shame that I experienced anxiety.
Yeah.
Huge shame, Miffy. Oh my God. Don't talk about it. Don't, like one time when the kids were little, I honestly thought that the reason no was been said to me about play dates was that the mother found out that I experienced anxiety
Mm.
and that they wouldn't allow their children over here. That's really sad.
Yeah, and I suppose what I'm getting a sense of then, Eilish, is this sort of pattern for you whereby you were looking for this external validation and you were busy hiding how you truly felt. And that requires a huge amount of energy, doesn't it? To kind of go through your life hiding, being ashamed. Anything we're ashamed of, we tend to hide, right? So you're ashamed of the anxiety, and so you're hiding that. You're so honest, Eilish. You're so open about this. And I think it's really important to have these conversations, because I think so many people, myself included, go through life bumbling along, trying their best and trying to do it on their own. And I really can identify with that, being on your own with it. I would have had a lot of that as a younger woman, not anymore, thank God. I've done a lot of work on that. But that feeling on your own with things and not knowing, just trying, to your best to do what you can, but not really knowing what you're doing at the same time, and hiding all your flaws. This pressure that comes from somewhere to be perfect, to have all the answers, to know what to do, to already know how to do something before you've learned. Hearing that in you as well, and yeah, it's such a journey.
Mm.
And so, can you share with me any moments, Eilish, where you got some intuitive hit, or you got some nudge, or some profound moment of knowing, that was a turning point, or that was catalyst to you making some new choice for yourself?
I know that I went into, if I had a thought about someone and it wasn't nice, then that meant I wasn't a nice person. And then in mindfulness, I learned thoughts are not facts. And I went, what? I was like, all these years, all my life.
Mm.
So I realized, so if they're not real, then all I've been thinking about me. So I said, I must be nice. Must be some part of me that's nice.
Wow.
I learned about the impact of shoulds and woulds and coulds. These are probably my pebbles. Because I wasn't comfortable where I was, I always either looked back to the past or to the future. But because anxiety would have been high, chances are the thoughts I had about the past were negative, or thoughts about the future was fear.
Mm-hmm. So what you're describing then is that those moments of learning, those kind of light bulb moments, were pivotal for you, where you kind of go, oh my God, everything I think isn't actually true. Wow.
It was as if Carmel had brought in a new wheel, that she had invented something. Thoughts are not facts. I think a lot of it happened during the mindfulness. So a lot of the changes. You asked about pivotal moments, but you also asked the effects of mindfulness. Around 2016, perimenopause, responsibilities, young children, lots going on. Because I probably never loved myself, I don't know if I really ever loved anyone. When you look at it like that, that's the power of self-love. And because when you were young, all you did was, well, if you loved yourself, you were cocky.
Okay, yeah.
Mindfulness taught me to love my family for who they are, because with all the distractions and not enough self-care, I was hating them for who they weren't.
Okay.
And my husband is the man I married 20 years ago. He's exactly the same man. And yet I wanted him to be something different. I wanted my children to be who the neighbours' children were. I wanted the children to be who Granny said they should be. And in all that while, I was taken my eye off the ball for who they actually were. Mindfulness taught me that. So I can't give you an incident that changed my life, but I can give you words and the meanings and the effects of them.
What I admire is how you've done the work or are doing the work. It's ongoing, isn't it? I mean, I know this life, it's always ongoing, isn't it? There's always layers, as Donkey says in Shrek,
yeah.
I'm like an onion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for being so open and honest about that process, because it is a work in progress. But to be able to really talk about our imperfections, our flaws, our mistakes, the impact of that on the people around us and our families and so on. But there's a lot of people listening probably who are going to be kind of nodding their heads and going, oh God, yeah, maybe I do that, or maybe somebody in my life does that to me, or you know what I mean, and be able to recognize it for what it is. So thank you for shining light on that, Eilish.
If it helped one person, and if every one of us did one little thing to help ourselves feel good, then it would ripple into other people. But you have to start with yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself and gratitude and forgiveness. And forgiveness is to release you from the tie, the knot, so that you can learn. Because if you don't forgive and if you don't have compassion, you make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So can you tell me a bit about your work then?
I deliver courses one-to-one or in groups. I love mindfulness groups because, again, it brings the energy and I get to be part of it. So I'm the learner as well. I sit in among them in a circle of whoever the class is, and I teach content, and that has to be done so that you can know how your mind works. That was the great thing. I learned how my mind works and why certain things are a certain way. Then I do lots of examples, and we would have meditations, and I would invite then the group to do the practice at home. And that's where the gift is. Practice at home. We can all attend classes, but for something like mindfulness, unless you start bringing your attention to it or your focus, it's a nice hour or 2 hours a week to benefit from it and to have it more meaningful. So I can do that on Zoom. And then with Reiki, I can do distant Reiki, which is energy healing. And that again shifts anything that's blocking or keeping the energy stuck, so that when all the chakras and all the areas in your body is flowing, then someone asked me, do you have to be sick to have Reiki? And I said, not at all. I said, if you have an idea coming into your head, but you just can't seem to get working on it, or everything you seem to be doing is not adding to the fantastic idea, maybe you're not asking for help, so your throat might be blocked. Maybe your creativity is blocked. And when I explained it that way, and I used all the chakras and I used the root, if you're a bit wavery, maybe your root is blocked. When you unblock all of that, you get everything moving and the idea suddenly starts to take action. Equally, if you're unwell, that the Reiki can settle all the cells in your body and all the energy systems, so that healing will be promoted and healing can start. But if you're all clenched up and you're all tight and stressed, there's no room for healing if your body is tense. The attunement that you would, the symbols, I would use them regularly. I would use white sage. I would use cord cutting. And I would have done a lot of talking and learning about CBT and all of that. But it was only when I started the healing, the Reiki, the cells in my body started to release all the blockages. So that's what I do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eilish, for sharing all this. And so if people wanted to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that?
They can email info@sensingmoments.ie. I'm on Instagram, sensing_moments. And I'm on Facebook, Sensing More Mindfulness.
Lovely. Well, I'll make sure all your contact details are in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk about mindfulness and your journey with it.
Welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Pebble in My Shoe. I found Eilish's openness and honesty about the things mindfulness helped her become aware of in her own behaviour very refreshing. As you know from the nature of this podcast, I love having honest conversations about the challenges we face and how we navigate them. And the more open and honest we can be with ourselves and others, the closer we get to our authentic self, I think. To make choices that support, nurture and energise us. And that all helps us to live more mindfully, stand in our truth and own our power. If you've enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe and share it with others. It makes it easier for other people to find the podcast. And if you have a story to tell about a pebble in your shoe, please get in touch. I'd love to talk about it with you on the show. As well as hosting this podcast, I'm a personal growth coach at the Daisy Coaching Hub, where I provide one-to-one coaching for personal growth, mental health and well-being, group classes and self-directed resources that support, nurture and energise you on your personal growth journey. You can follow me on Instagram at the Daisy Coaching Hub and also on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can visit my website, www.daisycoaching.ie, and also subscribe to my newsletter to be the first to know about events and what's new at the Daisy Coaching Hub. I look forward to sharing the next episode of The Pebble in My Shoe with you. Bye for now.